As you will all recall, we've been suffering through what we refer to as the coronavirus. I have here some facts behind it that confirm a suspicion. People are so sure that everybody is responsible for all of the diseases in the world, but that's not true. If you take a look at this diagram right here, it shows you the different categories of people in the world. The orange ranges and the red ranges are where all diseases are started. Diseases are given different names to help to change names to describe the different epidemics without repeating any names. Those names sound rather weird because there aren't any other ways to name them. Starting with the top red section here is where certain personalities are deadly. People may have all different kinds of personalities, but there's a point when it's out of bounds. Looking at the number of single personalities, each one you follow with other mounts up to over 80 billion. While most of them are multi-personal, or only a few of them are single, there are at least 33 single personalities that are in the safe zone. Follow one with another and you can count it all up to 8 billion possibilities. However, the top red section here is the deadly zone of people's personalities. This zone consists of people who are evil or snotty or lame. People with evil personalities are the worst in the world, especially if they present around school students who have developmental delays. They really hate children and people with disability with the way they're spectating their behavior without proof of whether or not that student's wrongdoing is primary or secondary. People with snotty personalities are the second worst in the world. A lot of them bump into other people for no reason and can possibly injure children. Many of them accuse other people of asking them personal questions when they really weren't. People with lame personalities are the third worst in the world. A lot of them just turn away from people when they see them and or give them such lame responses. A lot of them don't care about what happens to anybody when they don't listen to them. All three of these situations give the most amount of litter and pollution germs. They just don't have the discipline to realize that. They trash up bathrooms and chew tobacco and gum and spit it into places that are hard to clean up and are spreading the stomach flu sickness everywhere. Going to the top orange section, here is where certain personalities are dangerous. They're defined as unadaptable because when people do those things to you, your choices on how to handle it are limited. This means you're either facing a brain dent from accepting their attitude or you're doing something to them that's illegal and facing criminal charges. In other words, you're only free from trouble with the law if you accept the response from them that you did nothing to deserve it. People seem to think that it's your choice to whether or not you want their behavior to hurt you, but that's not true. That's not how we work towards ending such behavior, even if you're not the kind of person who acts according to the following lists. You need to realize that by pretending that you're not being affected by it only makes it worse. Pause the clip and take about a minute to read through these pages so that you can see what I mean. Now I hope that you can see what I mean. Both the top red and orange sections of this diagram describe where the majority of the pollution and diseases came from. People thought that it was just a choice of whether or not people can choose to act those ways, but that doesn't seem to be true at all. Recent studies have shown that a person with personalities from either of these top red or orange sections have an infection in their bloodstream called the HIV. Everybody knows the HIV as the leading cause to AIDS. That virus is transmitted from the HIV person to the non-HIV person. But here's something about the HIV that most of us don't know about. The HIV comes in three types as follows: type 1 HIV, type 2 HIV, and type 3 HIV. Type 1 is the kind that if transmitted to another person will give them the AIDS. Type 2 and Type 3 are the kinds that, if transmitted from their bodies, it can't be broken down through the sewage system after they pass their body waste. This causes the virus to get into the food supplies and drink supplies without anybody knowing it, and it causes silent killers. When it comes to silent killers, young female animals are the most vulnerable to them, and nobody knows knows why. The solution to help to stop silent killers and to destroy the HIV is to have that person's blood drained out and then replaced with blood that has a healthier type. That's done with a person with the type 2 HIV. For the type 3 HIV, person like that will be required by law to undergo electrical shocking therapy. That's done with that person being held in the county jail and directed to walk forward and then trip and fall down onto some electrical wires. That would kill the HIV right out of their blood, even though they're likely to die from it. Blood that's infected with the type 2 HIV or the type 3 HIV, after it's drained out of that person, goes directly to the incinerator to be burned to nothing. All of that heat destroys viruses into sterility. How to make sure that such people are found is now the easiest task of all. See this new device? It's very handy in the event of somebody needing to help when nobody else is nearby. It helps the dispatcher know about it, especially if the accident happened to where they couldn't reach a telephone to make call. It's partnered with the new life alert system recently installed, but it's also made for some other uses. In the event of a snotty or lame person who either litters or bumps into people or poaches, this bracelet is capable to ring up the dispatcher's office. The dispatcher takes in all of the reports of those incidents into their computer system, and it tells them where such behavior is happening as well as what. Unlike the police or the fire department or the paramedics who sound their sirens and flash their lights, the dispatcher sends out the Humane Society with no sounds or signals to get such a bad person by surprise. They take that snotty or lame or evil person to the county jail and make them fess up to what they've been doing to people. Mostly that's done with the county officer using a cane on their leg until they fess up. Then they stay in the county jail until their date for a blood cleaning or electrical shock. Bracelet reports a crime a lot faster than calling Crime Check on the phone. Dispatchers, when they receive these reports through the wristband on their computer system, get paid a lot to search it all down. This bracelet monitors the environment in which you're in too, so that the nearest dispatcher who receives the message can refer that message to the correct disciplinarian. In a situation at school where a teacher is imprisoning a student to an impossible assignment or an ability to remember that's recess, the message would go to the police department to have that teacher arrested from that classroom. In a situation where you're talking to somebody who's consistently confused, the message would go to the nearest arbitrator to get to the vicinity to talk to both of them. In a situation where a student in school is being bullied by another one who's bad, the message would go to the school security to bring that situation to justice. Bullying students sometimes trash up the bathrooms and causing the stomach flu to spread without any regret. Such a report can stop it very fast in the event of you coming to a store where the merchant is greedy and shielding you out and failing to listen to customers and refusing to allow coworkers to help. The message would go to both the Better Business Bureau and the FBI to have it reported. The same thing happens if a place you're requesting help with something isn't providing in a passive only. About 3 or 4 reports of that greedy business's attitude would be allowed until action needs to be taken against them. For example, if the channel setting on the TVs aren't adjusted to what's acceptable for children to see wherever children are present, after the 3rd or 4th report of channel changing refusal, they just turn off the circuit breakers to the TVs in that building. In the event of a person who's being harassed in any way, the message would go to the nearest police department and courthouse to report it. Action will be taken against whoever passively disregards people's wishes after they've been to either 3 or 4 reports. There's no good in ending up in trouble with a lot of people who can't communicate properly, taking all of your freedom and voting rights away. Right here in the top yellow section, it displays people who have special talents, such as mathematics, parodying songs for people's birthdays and such. That's not a problem at all, since they make pretty good teachers for the next generation of people over and over again. Right here in the top green section, it displays people who are just average in their personalities. They seem to be rather good in spite of not having any special talents, just as long as they're learning from people who do have special talents. Right here in the bottom green section, it displays disabilities in people that really aren't a big deal. In other words, just legal disabilities such as autism. Autism at any level, where in the yellow or red section of the graph falls under the bottom green section on this chart. Neurophysiology repairs to those issues up into the top green or top yellow sections of this diagram, but legally that person is still autistic because those installed abilities into their system are only artificial. Right here in the bottom yellow section of this diagram, it displays mental and physical disability issues. Type 1's Down syndrome, Williams syndrome, and such fall under this section. People who are deaf and blind fall under this section too. These kinds of disabilities are pretty easy to communicate with if you learn how to and try. Right here in the bottom orange section of this diagram, it displays disabilities that you cannot communicate with no matter what. Those kinds of disabilities imbue confrontational behavior from a person who meets them far too easily. Confrontation with a person with any one of these kinds of disabilities is very costly. Disabilities like these will fall under the requirements for them to get services just to prevent other people from getting injured or into troubles with the law. Pause the clip and take about a minute to read down this page so that you can see what I mean. If ever there's a problem with any of these disability issues, they must have an Exelon device installed under their neck. This consists of a magnet under the rear of the neck that's been surgically installed, and then the other part is the electric box that joins to the magnet. It has all of the good functions that the human brain consists of. It backs up for the damage in their brain that destroyed their functions. Any person with a non-communicable disability who isn't wearing this device will cause the caretaker of them to be held responsible for somebody in the community facing trouble with the law for person with disability abuse. And now right here at the bottom red section of this diagram, it displays disabilities that are known to be invasive. Because of the problems written in pink on the next chart, you can easily see why people feel invaded by these disability issues. Starting with the incessant circular walking disorder, ICWD, and the wandering disorder, you see that those disabilities are invasive due to them taking over up to 88% of one room. The maximum occupancy written on the sign in the room helps people to know clearly, but 7/8 of that maximum is taken over by such a disability issue. This means that a person with either of those issues is taking up to 88% of the room for themselves and only 1/8 for everybody else. Them able to help it or not is no excuse to allow them to incessantly do that. You must send them to the neurophysiologist to have that issue fixed, or else you're just taking occupancy in the center away. Then comes severe Tourette syndrome and severe out of the blue behavior disorder. What's wrong with those disability issues is how weird that such a person acts and how it imbues slurs from the lips of some people who see it. It's hard to avoid saying those words or making dirty comments when you see a person who's like that, and that's something people would rather see in a different look. People often think that such a person should be dressed up to look like a clown, where they dance around funny and create lots of laughter, but that's only for a person with a mental disorder with incessant weird movement. Recently, neurophysiologists have found a way to create artificial replacements for such helpless situations. Then comes approaching and embarrassing people with irrelevant things to say without saying excuse me. That's not just annoying, it's also contagious. Somebody like that causes damage to people's concentrations and leads them into mental brain damage. A person like that will be required to wear a repellent device around their thighs so that they'll be easily frightened by other people when their manners aren't acceptable like they should be. Be that as it may, that is discrimination, but it's all there is to ensure the health of everybody else in the room. Then comes disorders that revolve around hovering or swiping or hitting or out of the blue jumping. That's also contagious as well as annoying because of some damage to property that gets done or injurious activity easily provoked from the person who comes across it. Stories of students getting into trouble with the law when confronted by a person with disability with those kinds of issues are very high. It's better if you make them wear a repellent device around their thighs so that they'll know how to stay out of the way of other people who don't like them. It's either that or live in trouble with the law through disability issues. Then comes low functioning like a 2-year old. Why such a person with that kind of disability is really a problem to have around is because they're impossible to communicate with. You can't train them how to do a job or do classroom work. You just be sitting there working yourself down to the bones without ever training them. This is why people aren't allowing a person with that kind of disability employment anymore. It's unsafe and unhealthy to be roommates with a person like that at an adult family home because of how they steal and destroy your property without realizing it. Proportion in mathematics proves that it leads to the world's poverty. It's arduous to be friends with a person like that because of how slow they are in their acknowledgement. Your patience with them will run out long before they acknowledge what you're telling them. That easily leads to confrontation and restraining orders from being allowed around them. Even just being in the same room with them is a problem because of how they mumble or talk to people when they're not talking to them, or how they respond back to people who do things to them. That can easily lead to aggression or confrontation or discrimination thoughts from those who are having to put up with them. Then comes a person with a hypertension disorder. That revolves around a person who's running around and doing damage to property and incessantly repeating himself or herself and getting addicted to yucky Cartoon Network, to loud noises consistently. Be that as it may, that they can't help it, but such a disability is very dangerous. People contemplate some serious intimidation on them just to protect themselves and other people from getting harmed. For their repetitive disorder, somebody might come up with a machine that tells them to stop it in a very demeaning way. For their destructive running around the facility, somebody might lock them into synchronized talking bracelets that'll frighten them when they destroy things. For their addiction to Cartoon Network, somebody might place a label near their TV that says, "This TV does not tune to Cartoon Network anymore," or "Whoever watches Cartoon Network here doesn't believe in the world's wealth." For their problem with making lots of noises, somebody might walk up to them and plug their machinery and cause silence. And then, when they start to complain about hearing no noises, that person will attempt to injure them. Proportion in mathematics proves that it also leads to the world's poverty. Then comes severe disability. That revolves around a person who's 100% helpless. They are living things just like everybody else, but they're not able to make their lives useful at all. They sleep all of the time and are carried around everywhere they go. They bawl whenever they try to say something all the time. They look rather ugly, and some people can't stand to even look at them. Their kind of bawling has made people hate the sound of bawling children quite a lot. Sometimes the caretaker places a disguise on their face so that nobody in public will get sickened by those ugly looks. They live in diapers all their lives, and the looks of people changing their diapers is up to 15 times more yucky than just doing it to a baby. People like that have made diaper changing into a disgusting controversy and have made people claustrophobic to the looks of diapers being changed. And down at the bottom of this diagram, where the worst of the disabilities are, i.e., the worst of the severe disabilities, as well as revolves around drooling, why that's the worst of the disability cases because not only is it disgusting, it's also dangerous. Some people are allergic to the looks of leaking body fluids and diaper changing to where they'll pass out on the floor. That kind of person of disability wearing only a bib just won't do. That only shields their clothes from getting dirty with their saliva. People talk about torturing that kind of person of disability just to preserve the health and safety of everybody else in the room. Things like stitching their mouths closed, making them wear a beard, or placing a curtain cloth around their faces to hide the looks of their drooling. Choice 3 is the right choice so that nobody has to worry about being disgusted. Passing out on the floor is likely to fall into a hydroallergic reaction. That consists of a person lying on the floor rapidly breathing and dangerously high heart rate. There'd be no need for CPR then. It's true that a person with a drooling disorder can't help it, but it involuntarily imbues disgust remarks from people who see it because of the hydroallergic reactions that people suffer from. This paragraph and the one before it is why nobody likes it when people advertise alcoholic beverages on TV and YouTube and billboards. It denies how it's responsible for at least 95% of the severe disability in the world. Now pause this clip for a minute or two and read down this list of the different cities in the world that have neurophysiology services available in them. Now pause this clip for a minute or two and read down the different cities in the world that have brain replacement services available in them. Those services may look like they're far away from where you live, but they're very nearby. If you can't afford the traveling to those cities as you see them, AAA or some other traveling service will bail you out with their financial systems. Those services may look like they're too expensive for you to pay within your account, but they're very cheap. If you can't afford neurophysiology or brain replacement, especially if you're flat broke, the federal government will bail you out with their financial system. Refusing to make those repairs, as you've been told, means that if by law required, you will be living in the county jail until you're willing to make those repairs. If you refuse to make these repairs as you need to, you're just asking to be held responsible for the world becoming impoverished and the world's diseases are breaking out. And this final page summarizes all of what you heard about in this clip. It's either you go by what this sign says or the coronavirus will live on forever. The longer we'd just be content with security masks, closed business, and social distancing, the longer this coronavirus will prevail and possibly grow even more. You might have been told how to stop the spread of the coronavirus on one side of the card, but the other side tells all about certain behavior problems and disability issues that cause the coronavirus and other diseases and the procedure to have it all stopped.